All right, I'm here with Abel. Abel's with us for a board and train program to work on some issues with dog reactivity is our primary focus with him. He does have some issues too with like some handling issues. He's got some issues with some territorial issues with his kennel and stuff. So, he's got a few other issues too that are in there that are all gonna kind of be connected. Once we start kind of working with him, I'm sure we'll kind of see all those issues come together and be connected in some way or another. What I mean by that is once we start to develop the appropriate relationship with him, once we start to gain some control of him, both through obedience training, through impulse control with play, that kind of stuff. Once we start to implement that into our program, I think we'll start to see some of those behavior issues kind of dissipate or weaken, lessen. Or be easier to resolve and stop once we focus on the right areas. We're not just going to go right into trying to touch his paws or anything like that, because he does have issues in that department. He's going to have a poop here, so just turn. We're not necessarily going to go right to addressing that issue head on. At first, we're going to start by building the appropriate type of relationship with him. See if we can get him playing, see if we can get him doing some fun activities like that. But otherwise, we're just going to make sure he stays fulfilled, stays happy. We have a good relationship with him and we can control him. So we might implement some tools like the off-leash training aspect of things, of course. So a remote collar for our off-leash training. Not only will that help with our recall, he's kicking dirt right at me. Not only will that help with our recall, but it will help us with being able to stop some of these unwanted behaviors very effectively. And immediately develop some of that authority that we're looking for here once it comes time to address these behavior issues. Tools like that will be very valuable to introduce. And that's kind of one of the things that, with a dog, look, he's just pooping everywhere. With a dog like him, where it's not just like, he's not just reactive to dogs on leash. He's got some other issues as well that revolve around him not necessarily being able to be controlled or restrained without it leading to some form of frustration or issue, retaliation, I suppose. And that can often be a thing we see with reactivity, right? It's not just like, oh, I'm excited or fearful of a dog, but there's often that underlying aspect of like, hey, when you try to hold me back from doing something that I want to do, it's I protest it, I challenge it, right? And that can kind of be where, again, I go back to like the underlying issue, where these issues are all kind of going to be connected to that underlying issue of developing the appropriate relationship with him, creating authority, creating control in situations where there is some high arousal. He sees the cow, so he might start acting up here, we'll see. But being able to just gain the appropriate kind of control with him and being able to kind of give him, I guess, a little bit more of the freedom he needs too, right? So once we again implement the recall training and even implementing a tool like a flexi leash right off the bat, I guarantee if he was on a 4-foot leash or a 6-foot leash right now, he'd be reacting to these cattle. But because he's got the freedom to kind of move about, it's going to be much less likely that he's going to have that reaction. Now he's at the end of the leash here. He might start to react, but it will be relatively easy to redirect it. And as we go forward and implement, like I said, the right training tools, the remote collar, maybe a pinch collar, whatever we need to kind of successfully punish and stop this behavior. And dropped my phone. And make sure his owners can do the same thing when it comes time for them to do it, to successfully punish and stop the behavior. We'll make sure they're set up for success to do that, and that we've done it here if we need to do it, right? And we will add the right signals and stuff. So, once we add the signals to tell him to stop doing something, that's something that should carry over very easily to his owners. And again, that will give them control, right? Both on and off leash control, verbal control, and physical control. These things are all very, very important. And like I said, I think once we have that, it will kind of, it'll kind of resolve some of the overall issues that we have with him, not just the on-leash reactivity, but the handling issues and stuff as well. Okay? And of course, we will work on those things with him while he's here when the time comes. Come on. Marks a lot. He's marking a lot on everything. That's okay, though. Good boy. And that could be why he was pooping quite a bit. He's pooping and kicking his feet up everywhere. Those are all kind of classic signs of him just marking his territory a bit. hoping some man will come up with a dog here so we can see how he does when we do encounter another dog. I'm sure that one of them will be out here in a minute. So just kind of walk around with him and see, let him relax. So again, I go back to the flexi leash here because I was discussing that. I mentioned it kind of briefly. Right away, we put him on a flexi leash and a martingale collar that he can't escape from. It's a solid one-piece martingale collar that slips over his head, not breakaway. There's no buckles or anything on it like that. He can't slip out of it. You can see that flat green collar he has. It's a really nice collar, but he could easily slip out of it or break through the buckles depending on how motivated he is to get to what he wants. And especially when we get the momentum going with something like a retractable leash, we need something extra strong, and that's either going to be always a martingale collar, so that's a fabric flat collar like your standard flat collar with a chain that connects to 2 O-rings and then goes into the middle with an O-ring that you can attach your leash to, like a circle shaped metal ring that you attach your leash to, and that allows the chain to slide through the 2 O-rings on the collar and tighten and loosen without fully tightening to choke the dog, but giving you enough tightening ability to implement a bit of a correction or a consequence. That chain sound can be quite aversive. It does take a bit of an oomph with your correction typically. If you're really trying to use it to effectively stop something, you might need to be a bit more forceful with something like a martingale collar. But when you condition it appropriately, that sound of just the chain can become an effective conditioned punisher, if you will, or a conditioned signal for the dog to ease up, to let off. But then we can also kind of, effectively control and stop the dog, give him some direction. We can adjust how snug it is so we can move it up and down on the neck to give us better control. I might have a martingale collar a little higher and tighter than a pinch collar, maybe, just because of that lack of pinching ability or corrective ability. So that gives us a little bit more of a sensitive spot to work with, more control. And again, in the event that we really need to gain control of the dog because they're just losing it, the martingale is going to be much better than the flat collar. They can't back out of the martingale collar. That's one of the biggest safety features of it. And I always go with a one piece, so like a single piece martingale, so they cannot break out of it. There's nothing for them to break unless they were to rip the fabric or break the metal, but I've never seen that. So that's kind of our equipment advice. Now back to the flexi again. So putting him onto the flexi here just gives him that extra bit of freedom to really test what he's going to do. Most of the time we find the frustration with reactivity is coming from them being, the behavior of reactivity, if you will. The reactions are coming from the frustration of being held back by the leash and not understanding how to take that kind of restraint, right? So something like a martingale collar, or something like a flexi leash, I should say, allows us to get rid of some of that frustration by letting the dog actually go out a bit more than what a traditional 6-foot leash would allow us to do. And that can really change the perception of the dog, if you will. It can give them a bit of a prediction error. They're going to be expecting to hit the end of that 4 or 6 foot leash, and then they realize they don't hit the end of that leash, and all of a sudden that behavior does not show itself, right? That same kind of level of reaction does not show itself because the dog feels like it's no longer being held back or stopped. Just like telling a child not to do something, they're going to want to do it more. That can often be the case here with these types of cases, right? With reactivity cases, right? Then you telling them to stop or you trying to get them to stop in an ineffective way, a non-meaningful way, and probably, not at the right time. Typically, it's not done at the right time when owners do try to stop their dogs. And these things can all lead to that frustration and that reaction, that explosion. So we're gonna go walk over here by a dog and see if he reacts. Let's see what he does. Come on. I'm gonna dog it over here now. A puppy. So we'll see what he does. Come on. Come on. Let's go. He's interested, but you can see because he's got that extra bit of leash, he's not going anywhere. He's thinking about it, but so that's the end of the leash there. So we're not really pulling him over, we're just letting him go to the end of the leash and stare. He's interested. Looks like he's gonna break that foot. Good boy, nice work. Good boy. And that's where we could give him some praise. Hey, good boy. Definitely a little suspicious of the dog, little puppy, so maybe different reaction with a younger dog. But super good example of where that flexi leash can come in handy. You can see he wants to go out there, and I did nothing to try to stop him from really going out there till he got to the end of that leash. Once he got to the end of that leash, I'm just kind of giving him a couple little prompts with it, maybe like direction, you know, giving him some direction with the leash there, but otherwise not really trying to hold him back or stop him, right? Now, you know, it's kind of like just one part of the puzzle. You know, if there was a reaction or an explosion there, we would want to have a way to stop it. Maybe not right at this moment, we don't need that, but at some point here, we're going to need a way to stop that reaction when it does happen. And that's kind of one of the big missing pieces of the puzzle that people often do not implement effectively. They get maybe that piece there, but then when it comes to, okay, but what do I do when he actually does blow up? Well, that's where we have to have the appropriate answer for that when the time comes. So again, we go back to tools like our training collar, our remote collar, electric collar. Conditioning a punisher outside of those reactions as well, of course, can be an effective strategy. So what I mean by that would be trying to get him doing something like play. Maybe he's got some intense food motivation or food drive, so we can utilize that to create some scenarios, some setups, some scenarios, I should say, where we can teach him that he must, you know, do what we ask him to do or tell him to do to access what he wants out of it, right? And that can be a good way to start to build some of that authority. Again, though, you do want to be careful, like, especially when it comes to using food for those kinds of exercises. It can become a bit of a one-sided thing where the dog is not really enjoying it, or not really, I don't want to say they're not enjoying it, but they're doing it just for that benefit of getting what they want. They're not doing it because, like, hey, I want to do this thing to do something with you, or to, you know, I want to do this thing here because it's the right way to act, right? Not necessarily just because, oh, there's food in it for me, or because I know my owner's going to give me something when I do that, right? That doesn't always necessarily build the right relationship. And that can be the same with toys. You know, if you're using just your play and your toys is just transactional stuff. Same with food. If it's just transactional, that's where you can create that little bit of an issue there with the way you're training. That conflict where it's like the dog is trying to just get to what you have. And outside of that, if you don't have that thing that they want, they're really much less interested in doing the thing that you want. And of course, there's ways around that. There's ways to manipulate that and stuff with dogs. You can get creative with like your reinforcement history, your reinforcement schedules, I should say, all that kind of stuff. But one of the best ways to get around that is just to create a real relationship with the dog, create real motivation, create intrinsic value in the work being done. So create like a desire for them to just want to do the activity with you, whether it's to play with the food or to play with the toy. They want to do it just to do something with you in a fun, meaningful way, not because it gets them something, not because they need the food because they missed dinner, not because they need the play because we haven't taken them out of their kennel all day. It goes deeper than that for sure, or at least it should if you're doing it right. So anyway, Abel, we're going inside now, okay? Good boy, nice work. Go do some training inside. Nice work. All done.